Hello and welcome to another edition of Pure Signal, where we digest the biggest developments in AI, machine learning, big data, and beyond, bringing you the strategy-focused insights you need to position your business for uncertain futures. You may be thinking to yourself, hey, this isn't Vincent Yates. Who is this?
Sounds better, though.
This is Ryan Medellin, and I'm a manager here at Credera, and you may be hearing a little bit more of me in the future. That is news that could come later, but today that is not the focus because we have a lot to get to. And joining us, as always, we have our North American CEO, Kevin Erickson, joined by his partner in crime, our Global Chief Technology Officer, Jason Goth. And gentlemen, welcome to the show. And Jason, I believe you have some news you want to share to start us off today.
I do have some big news, and thanks, Ryan. He sounds a lot better than Vincent, and it's not even
glad that Vincent missed the last 3 flights.
I know, no kidding. But this will be my last Pure Signal podcast. I'm moving on from Credera, so I will miss this very much. But I think it will be in great hands with hopefully Ryan in the future, Kevin, Vincent, and someone else that is joining us today, Mr. Jake Carter.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
So, Jake's been on before, but just as a reminder, who are you and what is your expertise?
What is it that you do here?
Yeah.
I'm Jake Carter. I have been on the podcast before. They let me come on one time and didn't invite me back when it turned into a video podcast, which is a little bit telling. But I'm our Chief Innovation Officer. I've been here a shocking 12 years. And like many of the folks here, my background is in technology. Worked at Google, worked at Zynga, and at a couple startups. It's good to be back.
Is there any truth, Jason, that we're replacing your name in the book with Jake? Or is that just a rumor?
Yeah, that is just a rumor. Yeah. So
see if that was a help book sales.
The other great rumor I've heard this week is that I'm retiring because of book sales.
Oh.
And all $4,000 of book sales we've had, I think, is not gonna do it. So
I think you should have let that rumor just ride.
Yeah, maybe. So
I've also heard you were part of the Micah Parsons deal. Any truth there?
No, other than we were talking earlier, and I was like, well, the Mavericks traded Luka, the Cowboys have traded Micah Parsons. Let's get the Rangers to get rid of, Jacob deGrom, and the Stars to get rid of. Well, you're the Stars expert. You tell me who they get rid of to completely destroy all sports in Dallas. See, this is another great thing. We never get to talk about sports with Vincent's here because he doesn't understand sports. He's actually missed, this one because he's coming back from the U.S. Open. He said, "How I'm going to the U.S. Open." I said, "That's tennis, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, tennis is the one with the racket and the yellow ball. And he goes, "Okay, good to know."
It's pickleball, right?
No.
Well, now that we've gotten all the news out of the way, a lot of exciting things coming for the podcast.
Well, before we do that, Ryan, and we'll say his name, but I just want Jason, I want to thank you so much for all that you've done for the podcast, for obviously friendship. We know that goodbyes are bittersweet, and this is not a goodbye. It's just a goodbye from how we currently interact with each other. And we do hope that you come back on as a guest at some point. But definitely want to thank you for everything you've done for me personally, for us, and just I know that we're not going to be able to replace you. But I wish you the best on your future selling adventures and how that plays out and what you do. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. It's been great.
Now, Vincent, wannabe Ryan, please get us
Vincent
some
upgrade.
Vincent wouldn't have cut you off there. We got to give him some credit.
I was slow. I was a little bit slow. I didn't have enough caffeine yet this morning. So
no, but we do need to use all of your brain today, Jason, because we got a big topic, and we're gonna let you leave it all out on the field for this final episode of Pure Signal for you. And I think it's a very interesting topic and one right up your alley that we can end on for you. And it's along generative AI.
I thought you were going to talk about it's about failure.
I was going fishing.
Oh, fishing. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But there was a report put out by MIT that has made headlines everywhere. And either Jason or Jake, I'll let you take it away with what we need to get into.
Well, it's actually an older report, but it's just recently been pushed everywhere. Forbes picked it up and McKinsey and others, and it's hit every social media outlet, technology podcast, including this one. Wall Street Journal articles, you name it. But the headline of the study is that, they say that 95% of generative AI deployments fail or fail to deliver business value. That's based on, combination of interviews, surveys of companies, and, deployments, looking at deployments of solutions. And, they go through what they feel like, were the root causes, or what the surveys and interviews and what they observed in the deployments were the root causes, and what you might, think about doing about that to solve it. And it's got everyone basically in a huff around, is AI in a big bubble, and it's going to burst, and there's not going to be, all this investment is overhyped, a lot like are we in like the .com bubble burst, which I think is a little bit, not to jump into it, but I think it's a little bit reactionary. I don't think it's a bubble at all. And there's a lot about things about that survey that I maybe have a different opinion on, or we've seen different data on at, with some of our clients. But, there's, I'm not saying that MIT is looking for some press and headlines, but, when you name a study, 95% of all AI fails, you're looking for some, I think there's a little clickbait in it a little bit.
So I think maybe best way to start this off, I would love to hear, all three of you have been involved in all these types of things going on with AI, and you've seen it firsthand, maybe just your own personal opinions on what you've seen in the industry and in the market, and then, how that ties into what the report's trying to tell us.
Well, I can jump in. Honestly, I'm not surprised to see the report. And in a really weird way, I find it encouraging. So here's why. If you come at it from the innovation lens, what they're seeing, I think, is no different than what we used to call, in hype cycle terms, the trough of disillusionment. We saw this big bang with generative AI. Obviously, it's gone everywhere. It reached maybe peak expectations. And now we're seeing a bit more of the reality of, hey, this isn't actually delivering what we thought it would deliver. And we could talk about why that's the case. But the weirdly encouraging part to me is, if we're already getting to that point, maybe that means we're about to move into seeing real value.
I have no doubt that 95% of the ones they have looked at have failed. Again, what we see is that a lot of them do fail. And, that I don't want to, maybe I should on my way out, make sure that I hype the book as much as I, as I possibly can.
Jake is,
but
Jake is the co-author of?
Yeah, no, that Vincent and I co-authored. But, and that is part of the thesis of the book is, a lot of these fail. Here's why they fail, and here's what you can do instead to make sure that they don't fail. And I do think that a lot of people have started to adopt a lot of those recommendations, they're in the book. They're not just only in the book. I mean, these are normal things. But like the first one, the first recommendation in the book is have a use case. You're not just deploying technology to deploy it. You need to try to do something, and then you need to measure and adjust. Like, you try something, you measure and adjust. This is product market fit in innovation terms. Is this thing doing what it's supposed to be doing? Is it driving the value we're supposed to see, et cetera? Like, a lot of people don't do that. They just want to go and, I saw a funny meme about this the other day, but it was like, CEOs like, we need AI to do what? And then it's like silent, like people are many of these deployments are, we've got to do AI. Let's go deploy it. To do what? Doesn't matter. Don't care. Don't know. Like, deploy it. And so, of course, those are going to fail. And that happens again with any hype. But I think the ones that actually do have a real use case, real purpose, they're probably getting a lot more value. That is probably one of the big criticisms of this report is they haven't published any of the data. So it's like, well, what do you actually know for sure?
Yeah. Well, just for those of you that aren't familiar, again, I'm just going to, the survey was 150 interviews, surveyed 350 different executives, deployments around roughly 300. So relatively small sample size still of what they looked at. But yeah, I'm going to it's interesting to me when I was listening about it. Obviously, you couldn't avoid it in the popular push, but just really around what is, for me, I was struck with what's the definition of failure, and how that plays out in terms of what is the return, which I think, I want to come back to you, Jason, here in a second, and actually potentially, in all seriousness, share some of the insights that you do, obviously, you and Vincent talk about in the book in terms of how do we avoid things failing. But I tend to also agree with both you and Jake in the construct of, you had this hype, everything's going to do it. Success initially was get me some AI. We're starting to use it. We're starting to see that. Well, now what does that mean in terms of whether it be individual use case or for our company? Where are we doing it? What are we looking at the proper purpose to what we're trying to accomplish? How we're going to measure that? What's the investment required? But I'd be curious, Jason, as you just kind of even take a step back and say, let's assume the premise is correct. I'd love for you to start to share some of your insights here on your last podcast of what would be reasons why things would not fail and how you would structure that. And obviously, Ryan and Jake, love for you to chime in from your perspectives as well.
Yeah, well, it's just like any other new technology, and it's, you have to learn, right, what it does well, or how to use it well and how not to use it well. I mean, the report focused on a lot of org challenges, like people don't want to learn it, they're afraid of it. Which is all true. I mean, those are reasons these things fail. You do have to, that's in the book. You do have to have really good.
I read the book.
Yeah, I know. I was just saying. But you have to have really good change management, explain, what's in it for me, for people, get over some of the fears. And so, yes, you have to do those things. But, like any new technology, any new product, we have hypothesis. It's a use case. It can do this. We can deploy something that can, pick something. If you're an airline, automate 80% of the fare changes, which are, let's say, maybe 30% automated today. Or you can, if you're a document processing company, we can, whereas 80% of the documents require some manual intervention, maybe we can get that down to, 30%, 20% of the documents require some manual intervention. Well, those things are specific use cases that have real value. You can go, we have seen, I use those two examples because that's an areas, examples of where we've seen people get some value out of generative AI, but you go and try it and, it doesn't work. Well, of course it doesn't work. I mean, there's a lot of, measurement, tweaking, tuning, evolution. I mean, eBay didn't support 20, million transactions a month its first week, right? All of these systems have to grow and evolve, and you grow and evolve them through measuring what works and what doesn't work and iterate. Have a use case, measure, iterate, and evolve. Make sure you have good change management. That is 4 of the 6 recommendations in the book. And I think that's what many of these are in the middle of. So if you take a measurement, in the middle of that, this is kind of my opinion on the whole report, is if you start that loop, you're going to slowly and build up and build up and build up and get more and more value. But if you just take a measurement of it at the very beginning point of that loop across all of these, or that cycle across all these companies, well, yeah, it's going to look like they're all failing. So to your point, Jake, I think this is a normal part of any technology deployment. It's just, I think MIT is, again, getting some clickbait press out of it.
Well, it apparently worked out well for them.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at their conclusions on what's working, what's not working, I feel like they had 3 main things. You hit on the first one, which is the things that are working right now are the ones that have a very specific, a very narrow use case. And they started with the use case. What's interesting to me, and I'm kind of curious if you want to expound on these, where the other 2 were, there's a feedback loop mechanism. So, it's able to improve as it goes, which ties back to what you were just saying. And it's integrated in an existing workflow. They're not asking people to change their workflow. Does that line up with what you've seen?
Yeah. I mean, people come in and they're like, hey, we need an AI. Well, let's deploy a chatbot. I mean, there's 10 million chat deployments out of there. And it's like, okay, well, maybe a chatbot isn't the right use case for every single company. If you look at some of the ones that have had some noticeable case studies published or value, like Klarna, right, with their customer service, they integrated it in their customer service call tree, right? If you look at others that have had, some noticeable case studies published, a big energy company published one around improvements in trading. It's integrated into improvements in trading, right? Remember I said 4 of the 6, one of the fifth was integrate this in. Like, no, no app is an island, right? Like, you're not going to just, I have this, now I install a chatbot and everybody uses the chatbot and not all these other applications. I mean, it has to integrate in, it has to get access to data, it has to integrate into the workflows. That's part of the change management, is making sure that people, know how to use it and incorporate it into their workflows. And like swivel chairing into a, chatbot is not a good workflow. If take Word, probably the first machine learning AI ever deployed at scale, I think, was autocorrect in Word. Maybe not true. Vincent would correct me on that, but it's pretty close. But like, if you had to swivel chair, and I think in the first version of, somebody's going to correct me, but I think in like the very, very first version of spell check, you actually had to open a different application and go over and type the word into it. Well, of course, no one's ever going to do that. No one's ever going to like swivel chair into another application and type a big prompt, right? What happens in Word? Well, it just had a little red squiggly line, and you right click on it and it shows you the correct spelling. Right? Like, that's how you need to think about integrating AIs into your workflows. And when you do that, okay, we all get tremendous value out of spell check. Some of us more than others, right? But I think, again, all of these, the change management and the integration are all part of the same thing, really.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is interesting around some of the, when you think about the specific use case, the integration into the workflows, that really makes sense. But then now I think about, again, we don't know exactly who were all the people that were interviewed in this particular survey, but I'm coming out from my vantage point, which is typically more the strategy or the kind of the more organizational executive type perspective. If you're an executive and now I got myself some AI and I wanted to see big changes, and maybe they actually even read, hey, Microsoft laid off 6,000 people, or all these support resources are seeing some of those big headlines around huge changes, and they're looking at their own team and they're saying, well, what's happened for us? And it hasn't been a whole lot of stuff. So yeah, I'm curious on just even around that expectation management between the executives and kind of the bigger elements of that, whereas the very practical advice of how you use this to continue to really change or speed up velocity within specifically use cases. And we're in this element, and maybe this is the definition of the hype cycle of where you're seeing it, and I believe probably most companies, and we're definitely seeing it in our clients and our own usage, or the adoption of AI and what we do is happening exponentially every single day. But it's really mostly still rooted in terms of velocity, personal improvements, those elements. The big system changes where I'm changing my departments, I'm getting through this, I'm running it agentic farms versus against each other, all those different elements. I don't know how many companies are at that spot yet, and so it could be just really missed expectations between what we're hoping to have happen.
Yeah, I mean, what do you measure? Like, what's success? Back to your question of what's success, what do you measure, right? If your measurement of success is, I'm, laying off 2/3 of my call center and saving $10 million, and that that may not be the right thing to measure in terms of success. Like, but am I cutting my, take a document processing example. Am I cutting my average loan time in half? Right? Like, well, that may not be something that, or maybe even 30%. Like, it may not be something that grabs a bunch of headlines or gets this, CEOs excited, but it is that is a noticeable improvement for someone. And, I think, if you keep stacking wins, wins and win on top of wins, then you ultimately get to, to big successes.
I want to pull y'all back just a little bit, because we're talking about once it's already been implemented and how do we measure that success. But I know something that I've seen, and I know you all have seen as well, is like one of the first questions you'll get is, are we ready for AI? And so what do you think somebody in an executive looking at this report saying that 95% are failing, what's going through their head when they're thinking about, how do I even start? Do I have what it takes to start? What would be the advice you'd give to somebody that's in that situation?
the thing that's encouraging to me about the report is what they're saying is the blocker is not the technology at this point. Like, the models are not what's holding back success. It's the organizational factors. And from a kind of weirdly encouraging thing, that's actually probably more addressable, meaning within their control, something that they can take action on. So that's the first thing that I would point out.
That's great. Well, maybe Jake, just to kind of keep to you. I'm curious, and as you think about just from an innovation perspective, would there be, could even go one side deeper at how do you actually choose the use cases and using some of the themes around through that, but maybe even bring broader up, like how would you actually think about this from, hey, we know that our business model or just our approach is going to have to continue to change, technology advancement, or really, I think it's even at some point now broader than just even a technology advancement. That's just what's causing the change. But curious how you would think about that from how do you, an executive coming in, could be in the IT or not, like how do we really look at some of the innovation or design type thinking of how we would prototype or not? I mean, I'm rambling a little bit here, but how we would actually bring some of those concepts that we would help someone choose what to go do.
Well, I'll give you the thing that jumped out to me from the report, their answer to that, and then I'll give you my own perspective. From the report, one of the things they pointed out was everybody is naturally going after the use cases on the growth side because they're more visible, they get the attention of the board of directors, and in some cases, you can measure them more easily if it's something in sales or marketing. But where they're seeing the real value, the real ROI is on the back of the house. Think about the automation that needs to happen in things like customer service. So that's probably what they would point to. If I think about it from the innovation lens, really it's the same mechanisms we've been using forever. Meaning, how do you go find the use cases? Well, you follow the money, you follow the pain, you follow the user, and those tend to be the places where you find the ripe use cases that are worth going after.
It's interesting, which kind of builds on one of the themes, Jason, you've talked about over the years is just really around the continuum of how, from a technical perspective, tech debt, all those elements, all those things that are behind the scenes that really make it difficult for you to move faster to what you'd want to go do.
Yes, data, people are always going to say, well, you need good data and you can't have a lot of tech debt. Yeah, true. But those things are solvable, right? And no project, this is going to sound crazy, I don't think any project has ever failed because of tech debt. Now that it's gotten slower, it's taken a lot longer, and we had to fix it along the way. But it's not like you say, well, we've made some bad decisions, so let's just throw up our hands up and we're not going to do it, or we don't have the data. We're not we can find the data, we can fix the tech debt. Like, those are not the things that I would worry about if I were CEO. I would much more worry about are we doing the right things, the right use case, and do we have the people and org sufficiently motivated or energized or whatever? And I mean, the big thing there is people think, am I going to implement this and lose my job? All right. That if I use this and I'm a developer and I use these tools and okay, great. I'm just, implemented myself out of a job. Or if we start doing this in the call center and we get so much faster, we're going to get out of a job. And we've talked a lot about Jevons paradox here. I don't think that happens. And I think if you look at, it is interesting. They didn't talk about this, I don't think, about what about the successes, right? Like, did the successes see these tons of, implications to individuals? I don't think they do, at least in the successes we've been part of. A lot of these things unlock just new things that you can go do. Like, just to give a real simple example. And again, I know I'm the one that always preach, hey, it's not just using a tool like Copilot to write code that you want to integrate these things in, but just taking that as a simple example, let's say a developer gets 50% faster. I do everything in half the time. Great. Well, I'm just got myself out of a job. No, have you ever been in a company like the backlog is infinite? Right. Like, we got 10,000 things we wanted to go do, and you could only do 100. Now you can do 200 or 300. Great. I still have 10,000 to go do. And in a lot of cases, and this, I think the heart of Jevons paradox is things that you couldn't do before because they were economically infeasible are now possible. A good example of that is, the airline fare changes, right? Because they're all text they're all unstructured. Fairs are unstructured text, tens of pages long, and people always wonder what when they call the airline, they're like, oh, give me just a second, I need to talk to my supervisor or whatever, and they're gone for 5 minutes. You're like, what are they doing? Well, they're reading the fares. It's never been feasible to try and parse those things into some machine, readable format and write all the if then else statements, right? I mean, you can in some limited instances, so I don't want to say that's not entirely possible, and some people do it, but like have a general solution for that, it's very hard to do. But now maybe it's possible. So we go knock that. That's something we can go do. And that is a new thing. Again, a new thing. It adds. I guess what I'm trying to say is it turns the backlog from the 10,000 to 100,000 because there are a bunch of things that are now economically feasible to go do.
That's an interesting idea that weren't previously.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one thing where, going back to Jake, your comments at the beginning, like I actually would tend to actually view this a bit as a positive too, in the sense of that, one, we're not putting the AI genie back in the bottle, right? I mean, so even if 95% failed, and that's a really accurate statement, I mean, companies are going to have to continue to push and invest. Individuals are going to continue to do that. And I don't think you'd be listening to this if you don't use AI in your daily life. And so I think all of us have probably seen and know how we're already using it in ways that have greatly changed how we do work. So I don't think it's going back, right? And so it's really a question of like, well,
probably 95% of .com companies failed too, but like it doesn't mean the internet is not
right. Yeah, and so I think that's really around. So it's going to be around how do you learn where people failed, where is the perception, how you're working through that. I think that's to me kind of the interesting element of that, and it probably starts to become competitive advantage if you can start to limit where those different areas are, learn from the failures of others. I also think it's kind of it's intriguing in terms of one of the things that I thought that I found in the report. I'd be curious on your all perspectives. It was really around the whole internal versus external divide in that debate. And it was interesting that the external vendors were having a much higher success rate on that versus internal. So I was curious to get both of your perspectives on what you think that might be. Or Ryan is actually...
I have the numbers for you here.
Oh, Ryan
right. This is how I know we're working well, because I was about to lead y'all to this next pasture, and you already had it queued up. So props to you. We're all so simpatico.
I mean, I like the new Vince.
So much better than Vince.
But yeah, so...
I mean, Vince would just given a snarky response.
I guarantee you...
Ryan will get there.
Listen, what is going to happen is the viewership, popularity of this podcast is going to like exponentially take off, and everyone's going to say it's because I'm not on it anymore. And I'm going to say, for right now, I'm predicting that, and it's because Ryan is the
What about me?
Oh, and Jake.
Yeah,
Ryan and Jake.
This is where the innovation's coming from.
Mostly Ryan.
He's the one who messaged me. Come
okay,
to my office.
Stats.
Yes,
so
but
so
the
much better
stats. Back to the topic at hand. So, according to the reports, like you had just mentioned, Kevin, external solutions reported to have a 67% success rate compared to just the 33% for internal builds.
I have a very jaded opinion on that.
Let's go with the non-jaded.
Mine's
first.
less. I for what it's worth, I actually wrestled with that data point. I mean, I found that fascinating. Obviously, we work in consulting, so there's some implications for us. But that was one of the more interesting things to me in the report. And I don't, at least from my reading, I didn't see a very clear, hey, it is because of this. But thinking about why that might be the case, I think there's a couple things that could be at play. And this will probably lead into your jaded response. The obvious one, to go to where you're going to go, Kevin, is they put hard dollars behind it. And there's a level of commitment that comes with putting hard dollars behind something that would suggest maybe you're more inclined to see it through. The other, though, I think I actually might have to do with the partners themselves. So what was going through my head is, well, is it the case that, going all the way back to your use case comments, Jason, the outside partners are finding those narrow places where they're going to play? They're getting really good at solving those narrow problems. They're learning the domain. They're learning from the feedback every time. And that's why they're seeing a better uptake, as opposed to, say, more of a skunkworks project that's happening inside the company that might not have the expertise. But what's your snarky take on it?
Well, I think that's definitely true. Like, I think they, the vendors go in with a use case. I can do X and it will save you Y, right? That's something they've done before. Like, the question I have is it really AI or is it AI whitewashed, right? Like, they've got some tool that works that they do this. They now say I've AIified it. They go tell some CEO, we've got this AI tool that does X now. And then they go do X, and then they show that result. The second part is vendors grade their own homework most of the time. And it's like, of course they're going to come back and say, oh, we're going to get you a 40% uptake on this. Of course, like, is it really AI doing it or not? Who knows? But they're going to come back and show you that you got 40%. Okay, great. That was successful. And so my bet is that if you looked at non-AI implementations, you'd probably see the same divide for the same reason. I didn't think about your investing hard dollars in an external tool, so that's probably that. There probably is something there too.
That wasn't very snarky. I mean, that was really tame. I think an appropriate snarky response would have been because the external vendors are sponsoring the MIT study. Yeah, that would have been, just so we know that it went viral because McKinsey and Forbes and other vendors that were picking this up. But I think it does make sense though, right? If there's probably very few open-ended contracts. And so therefore you're saying you're going to have some sort of outcomes. Therefore you're going to pick a specific element of that. It'd be interesting around, learning more as we think about just what do you do with that information? But, as more companies become more open-ended of huge organizational change or big structural changes, like that's going to be interesting how you choose, success in that. But also, I mean, a lot of that's going to lead to really more external help versus, I don't know how many companies are going to use their own departments to kind of radically change what they're doing and how they're operating.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing is like what is an internal versus like what is internal versus external defined as? Like nobody's building these big LLMs internally. They're buying ChatGPT. They're buying, Anthropic, whatever. They're all external.
Yeah, I mean, my interpretation of that is more around vendors who's helping them achieve that, which goes back to I think what you were saying before around there's a very specific reason why that exists and what they do. But it is interesting. Maybe let's park the external for a second and actually talk about the internal. So if what could we start to do? How would we advise our clients or just companies to be thinking about how would you increase the success rate of an internal funded or initiatives around these themes?
I actually wouldn't park it, right? Because like the point is like figure out.
Now we're getting snarky.
Like figure out what you want to do and how you're going to measure success. It's just like we always say, think traditional code. Like don't, tell me the requirements. We'll go figure out how to design and build it. Like figure out what you want to do. Like, and again, I think that these vendors are coming with a use case in mind. Figure out what you want to do, and then figure out how to do it. Whether it's internal or external, I don't think it matters.
I'll build on that because one of the things that was in the report that didn't get nearly as much press as the 95% number was this idea, and I won't get the quote quite right, but it was something to the effect of AI is already transforming business. It's just not happening through the official channels. And they talk about really what's happening is almost everybody in companies is using AI on the side of their desk. They're using ChatGPT or Gemini, you pick it. Where that comes back to what you're saying, Jason, or the question that you were asking, Kevin, is if I was advising a company, I'd start with that. Meaning, if you know that all of your employees are already using AI, whether they're admitting it or not, figure out what they're using it for, and that'll help you find the use cases that are worth building on.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think on that for the old guys at this panel this week, who lived in shadow IT worlds and probably made a lot of money getting rid of shadow IT worlds.
Or implementing it.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting construct or question, Jake, because I think it may be where the instinct for the gray hairs that are running companies that probably have negative connotations to that, it might be this is the case where actually to invest in that and to encourage that behavior because that's where innovation is going to occur. And again, that may be still more primarily in the lines of acceleration plays, whether it be for top or bottom line. But I think that if you put even from my vantage point of my role, I am firmly convinced that the more our teammates are using it every single day, we're going to find more and more applications for it. So I would be very open to that. Now, working part of a public company, there's actually some constraints against that make it more difficult. So, which is going to be interesting when it comes to when we really start having models that are using and storing data in a different way than it is today, but which is will continue to come. But I guess it is interesting around, do you care if they use third-party and models and having a bunch of shadow IT, and ultimately, as in a workforce, actually, I would applaud people figuring out how to do it faster and better. But there's a lot of implications to how we measure employees and growth of companies rather than we go down these themes.
Yeah, there's a lot of, the governance topic always comes up, and I think that companies there's a big difference between making the wrong things hard and making the right things easy. Like, it sounds the same, but those are not the same, right? And I think most companies take the approach of, let's make the wrong thing hard, which makes the right thing hard is the problem. And instead make the right, so we can't have these, kind of bottoms up, let 1,000 flowers bloom use case definitions, because we don't want people just putting random stuff in whatever platform they go buy, Grok or whatever. Okay, great. We'll get them an enterprise version of it that has, some data protections or whatever, all the vendors provide this, and encourage, make it easy to use that. Hey, you want to use this? Great. It's single sign-on. We've plumbed the data in already. We don't have to worry about these kind of security or privacy issues, because we've already handled that through the contract. And that's part of the change management. It's hey, when you use a different one, you're going to go through this big litany of, governance questions, or you can just use this one, and people will start using that one, right? And there's a way to address governance and still have the bottoms up.
I actually think this issue is really fascinating, because what we're seeing is a bit of tissue rejection on the part of everyday users, because what's happening is, from the best I can tell, they're using the consumer grade technology, the chat GPTs of the world. Their expectations are getting set based on that tier of technology. And when it comes to the enterprise solutions, they're perceiving those to be clunkier, slower, less usable, and they're rejecting them. What would you make of that? How does that fit with what you're saying?
I mean, they're the same solutions. I don't know that I mean, in many cases, they're the same solutions. You just got the right enterprise, indemnity and copyright protection. These are all these things are policy and indemnity and data protection and legal stuff in MSAs. There's no difference in the implementation, I don't think.
I would generally agree with your statement. Behind the scenes, they're probably very similar. I think there is a difference in perception.
Maybe so, but you're oh, we're not putting stuff into ChatGPT because we don't want Microsoft having all of our data. I'm do you use Outlook? I mean, they have all your SharePoint. They have all your data. Yeah. They have access to all your data.
Yeah, where I go is, I think about a few steps down, to where is there a ceiling of where, if just the personal usage of kind of the commercial grade tools, to where, right now that might be easier. I can just do it. I can do it wherever across my device. But at some point, the organizational gains are going to be stymied if you're not using more of the larger enterprise solutions, particularly as we start having.
Let's separate enterprise solution from an enterprise license to a consumer tool.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. When I say enterprise solution, I'm talking about that stuff that is integrated in the word spell check example that you never see. You sit at a desk, you have to manually update loans that don't go through the automation, right? You see 1/3 as many, have to do 1/3 as many because we were able to automate stuff with GenAI. That's the enterprise solution.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Stuff you never see. That, Chat GPT Enterprise is just it's the same tool, just licensed.
Right. No, I get that. Yeah, I think, that's, I'm going someplace where it's more knitted together. You're using your data, you've got your workflow, but inherently in that, it has some probably perceived, restrictions as well. It continues to work through that. Just think about even going back 15 years ago and thinking about the differences between a consumer app and an enterprise app in terms of the usability and flow of it. But I mean, there's always been people on. I guess you can look at you because this is one of the. I feel like you're one of my personal testers for whatever I should be going to do next. But I mean, there's always going to be people that are going to be ahead of using different adoption or different apps or different tools and how that plays in through that and how that cascades back. And I think companies have always benefited from that. But it's going to be intriguing to me, and maybe I'm a little bit biased just in terms of where some of our clients and a little bit where we play too. Like, what is the risk tolerance of how that plays through, and where do we slow up innovation because of some of the concerns about either security or other elements, or just even change? I mean, there's a lot of just it's hard. You have these processes that have been embedded for years, and even if everyone knows you could do it more efficiently, you still have to go change. As we start annual planning process, right? I mean, companies across the globe are starting to think about that, and you're like, all right, what's the first thing you do in annual planning? Well, let's dust off last year's models and just literally just start filling the numbers. And what if you were to think about it radically different? I think that's what's happening at the side of the desk versus what's happening at the enterprise level.
I agree. That's certainly the case. But that's where, back to Jake's point, like, let's figure out what those things are and institutionalize them.
So where do we do? So we got this report. It's gotten obviously maybe slightly less traffic than the Parsons trade did in the last 24 hours, but but maybe not. So what do we do with it? Jason, we'll start with you. What would you do with it now? How do you actually internalize it into your day-to-day, or is it just hype and something that got a lot of clickbait here in the last few weeks?
Well, I'd buy the Intelligent Enterprise.
You should absolutely do that. I mean,
no, but again, in all seriousness, like, what are the biggest, pain points? Follow the users. What are the biggest pain points of the users? Like, find places to integrate and grow. I mean, it's this is going to sound like a really crazy analogy. It's a lot like Excel. Like, who uses Excel in your company? Everybody. Right. Well, they didn't at one point. Right. People have grown and started using Excel. Like, grow and okay, there are points where things grow out of it. Hey, this is a really good idea, and Excel took it a little bit, but we need to not make this now an official, we can't just do mortgages on Excel anymore. We're going to have a mortgage management system. We'll automate a lot of these things. Let people experiment, find the things that drive value, for users internally and externally, and then go, make those, production grade, I guess I would say, but and measure and improve them. Like, it is not any different than any other, technology that comes along. Like, what do we do with mobile? Or what do we do with cloud? What do you do with, the internet? Same thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think, we've talked plenty about it on this episode, but it definitely starts with the use case. Find the use case. And I think the new addition here is, don't go for the flashy use case. Go for the one that's going to be high value, high ROI. And know that might be behind the scenes. The other thing I think that's apparent is...
By the way, not to go back all the way to the very beginning, I do think that is a symptom of why a lot of the internal ones fail, is because they pick flashy, not valuable.
Or the biggest problems instead of making incremental improvement growth.
Yeah.
Jake, I know we just both cut you off, but I want to go back to you. But I think it's interesting to me around, the high valuable or flashy, or just like, that's one approach, but it also can be like consistently build. Like, right now I would tell companies, and I would tell our company, every day, use models more, accelerate process forward, solve those use cases. And yes, this may be the one that really is painful, but we don't quite know how to get there. But we got a bunch of little ones that we can get improvement on today, and just to be knocking them down, because it does take change. And so that would just the velocity of just continued use, and we'll continue to get to the bigger, hairy ones.
That's actually where I was going to go for this. The second was I think the big learning here is, don't expect your users to change the way that they're working. If you're going to go, even if you find the right use case, it better dang fit with the way that they're working already, if you expect it to get results. So I think that was the theme. And the final one, actually, you hit on as well, Kevin, which is expect that these things must get better over time. Meaning, I think the solutions that are succeeding today are not the ones where you take one shot and it's working out of the box. It's the ones where, hey, we're going to implement something to the point you were just raising. It's going to work, but we're going to build the mechanism so that it's going to work better the next time and the time after that and the time after that.
Yeah, no system has ever worked right the first time.
But and maybe that being my last build to this would be on that too, is going back to even the premise, what is a failure? It's possible in this right now, we should actually be more okay with, if you're doing use case and they're the right size, failure may be okay, or it may not achieve exactly what you want to do, and that's okay. But at least you got something, you did something, you improved it. Failure is when you go, nothing happens, or it doesn't change at all, or you invest a lot of money in, like, what would be a failure today? Well, we're trying to spend, which one of the 5 models should we be using? And we're spending all our time trying to figure out the incremental improvement of one of the 5 models. It's like, just pick one and go and change the process and your expectations of how you use it. You're going to have much more returns than the incremental adjustments you may get from the right one. And there's likely going to be people in your company that are doing that testing anyways on the side. So, yep. Ryan, what say you at the end of this episode today?
I'd say it was a fine episode. I think this is a topic that we'll probably continue to touch on as more information and research is done, and just super excited to be with you guys and be just a part of this, fly on the wall for this group of innovators, if you will. So any other final thoughts before we get out of here?
Been great doing this with you guys. Look forward to listening more, and hopefully I'll be back as a guest sometime.
Awesome. Well, for myself, Ryan, for Kevin, for Jake, and for Jason, thank you so much. This has been another edition of Pure Signal, reminding you to stay curious and stay connected.